this might be a good segue to give an introduction about you.
All right.
Who's Franci Davila, and why is she someone that can speak in this topic?
Ooh, hello, everyone who's
Welcome.
listening and my fellow co-hosts over here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Emil, Ra. Okay, who is Franci Davila? Back in the day when I was young. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, I always do it. It's going to happen a lot.
Exactly.
It's gonna happen a
I got
lot.
Fresh Prince in my head right now, too. I think I actually might need some prompting questions. To start, I can tell you who I was from when I was a kid, or I can tell you like how I've developed, especially being on Kauai for almost 15 years now.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess we could just start with the business aspect of the nonprofit that you
Okay.
that you started.
All right. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I can be identified as a therapist, as a mental health counselor, as a clinician. But I think that I wear many hats typically. You know, I can be somebody's life coach. I can be somebody's spiritual guide. I can be somebody's cheerleader. It just depends on what the need is for the individual who is seeking out support in a therapeutic setting. And I want to say back in 2018, maybe even a little earlier, I had been developing my specialty in the mental health field. And at that time, there was, I'm not sure if you folks remember, but there was a spike in suicides.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty gnarly on island. And during that spike of in suicides, I was holding space for people who are struggling with thoughts of suicide. I was holding space for people who had lost loved ones to suicide. And then I have to admit, what it brought up for me was memories of my own self that had thoughts of suicide throughout my lifetime, but especially when I was younger. And so there was a part of me that the fortitude within myself, I started to break down. And having to show up for other people on this intense topic, but then knowing how much it was impacting others and also impacting myself, I almost felt like I had to put a mask on and kind of just like, you know, all right, Franci, you got this. Like, let's go. Yeah, game face. And I remember there was one day where I was talking to one of my mentors / supervisors, and I had told her, I was like, if I hear about one more person that's taken their life, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I just can't emotionally, mentally take it anymore. And literally within hours, I had found out that somebody else had taken their life. Wow. And it was devastating. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to understand my own capacity. And so I took the rest of the day off. I went home. I cried. I probably stopped at the ocean, kind of gave my tears and my wailing to the waters and the trade winds, and did my grieving process in that kind of way. But when I connected with some of my community and people who I love and we support each other, friends, family, Hanai family, things of that nature, there was a point where 3 women, myself and 2 other women, one, Chanel Josiah, and then Belle Heredia and myself. Belle is a nurse. Chanel is a Native Hawaiian mother and an active community activist, especially for the Native Hawaiian community. And the 3 of us who had all been directly impacted by people who had taken their life, we were like, this is not just a small silo where like it's just us that are feeling this. The whole entire community, the whole entire island is feeling this. And so we said, why don't we do a community forum? That community forum, the first one that we did, it was literally like throw a couple of like, you know, posts out on Instagram, you know, let some people know, a word of mouth, Coconut Wireless. We had 40 people show up to that first one. Wow. And included people who had been struggling with thoughts of suicide, people who had lost people to suicide. We had county resource providers. We had local county council that came and that participated as well. And also professionals within the field. And it was so interesting how, because of the need for community counseling, not just one-on-one counseling, but community coming together and actually holding space for each other, learning with each other, and then supporting each other, it allowed for us to then begin what we now call Kauai Mental Health Advocates.
Wow. Okay.
And Kauai Mental Health Advocates, known as KMHA, is we're on a mission to destigmatize all issues around mental health and wellness.
Beautiful.
It's a stigmatized concept. You know, a lot of people, especially within different cultures, have a difficult time to really embrace the fact that we're all connected to this topic. And so we have a mission to destigmatize the concepts around this, to provide resources, to put on some dope events for people at times, and then also to expand accessible mental health services for individuals on islands, because there's such a scarcity of it. And it's also one of the reasons why at times people feel so desperate, so in pain, and they are limited in kind of like identifying different ways to kind of get support.
Dope.
Yeah.
Man, I truly,
That was jam-packed.
truly
There's
appreciate
a lot in there now.
I appreciate that intro because
Wow.
it gave a great insight to, you know, why you started what you started and how it was created. And I personally definitely appreciate the outlet you're creating for the community, because it's definitely needed here and in other places as well.
I think it's definitely needed, I think, everywhere, you know.
Absolutely.
Especially in Kauai, like, you know, we are a nitpick community. So I think what we strive on and what we do really well is helping each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't help each other, especially in, you know, aspects in our life that we can't control,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with the stress, it's hard for us to get through anything.
Absolutely.
And you know, mental health is such a big thing, especially like, you know, being a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of challenges that you go through in your own head. Like you have, you know, you might have a business and you have family
Mm-hmm.
that you have to take care of, and you know that you have to make sure that the business continues to run so you can support your family.
Right.
You have people that, you know, employees, like, you know, it doesn't have to be just business owners, like people that are just working in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
It's stressful because, you know, you never know, like, if this is the kind of job you want. You don't know if it's providing that life that you want for you
Or
for
what
your
happens
family.
if you wake up and your job is not there no more, like COVID and things like that. So
Right, exactly. What would you say is something that's pretty common that you've seen with mental health in general, like not just about business, but just mental health? Why people seek you know, service providers like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and how do they get there? Because we would want to introduce more people to be more open to this.
Right.
and
Absolutely.
eliminate the stigma, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like how you had just like said that in business, stress is like a common piece of it. All right. The thing is, when we say mental health impacts everybody, it's almost like we all have physical health, we all have mental health, we all have emotional health, and we all have spiritual health. And we can kind of go on with that list, like depending on the nuance of like how people identify. When we consider stress, everybody has stress.
Yeah.
When we consider life issues and problems, things that come up in adulthood, young adulthood, identity development, how we process and regulate our emotions for everything, we all experience this. And at times, especially when we were young, all right, so I claim it. I'm Generation X / millennial.
Talk to 'em.
All right. So it's like, we like to kind of say like Xennial at times, but as a
80s
millennial,
babies.
right, 80s babies over here. So I think the huge part of what was cool about the rising up of millennials was we were born into the thought process of baby boomers, who was pull up your bootstraps, deal with it. This is what it is. You just got to work with it kind of thing. Now, the one thing that happened with Generation X and millennials was we went to school.
Access to information.
Yes, we were the ones that, in how it was kind of traditionally taught to us, was go to college after high school. So even though there's a huge influx of us that are hindered with student loan debt, which I will say, hey, I'm glad that I invested in myself. Right there.
Shout out to the VA. They eliminated my debt. They paid for me to go to school.
Snaps to that right there.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We went to school. We all got access to information. And the thing is that secondary education, in comparison to like regular K-12 education, very different. The exploration and the items that you can have over there, pretty expansive. And I know that at that point, it's kind of like we then understood, hold on a second, maybe it's not as they told us.
Critical thinking.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's actually that I want to use more resources to look into what my truth is
100%.
rather than
Right.
what people
Right.
are
Not just A
telling
and
me
B.
what to think and believe and act and do. And so I think that a critical piece of Generation X and millennials was that we did get educated. And so now we have a brain of our own, a heart, and we're connecting it to body, intuition, somatic work that we have. And we have become very much consciously aware of the mental health aspect and how it's just as important as the physical health that we have, as the dependency and consistency of a job in order to pay our bills. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, we need to be able to physically get to work or work remotely, you know, but we need to have a certain level of mental capacity in order to be able to perform our daily duties, whether it is occupationally, personally, relationally,
Right.
all of
Our
it.
duties as people.
Yeah. And so I think in that, it kind of wraps around always to, we learned that mental health is a lot more valuable and actually a critical element to being a whole person in how we see ourselves and our connection to the world.
Dope.
Yeah. I love how you touched on that subject of how, you know, the rise of just information, how we have access, the education that we receive and everything. Because, you know, we've never really had a lot of like information thrown at us until this coming generation. Right now, it's like with Gen Z, you know, I'm actually in the same border as you, where I'm between the millennial and the Gen Z. So it's like you have all this like the information that was there when you were younger that, you know, you didn't have social media back then,
Yeah.
to growing up with social media. It really puts a stress on people's mental health.
Absolutely.
And I think we could all see that too.
Yeah, I look at it like a gift and a curse, right? Because we got all this access to this information, but then there's also the other darker side where it's information overload, right? Where there's people that are in your ear, like we talked about. Well, I think it was like our first episode, where like there's gurus on Instagram and social media that tell you want to make $1 million, just click the link in the bio. And then they're just flooding you with all this information that might not be practical to you.
And I think the hard part is too is just like the fact that we, my generation grew up with social media, right? We have this kind of stigma to compare ourselves against everyone in the world now.
Ooh.
So it's like, you know, like we all look at each other as if like, you know, this person's doing that. This is what like a good looking person looks like. This is what a, like, you know, this is the type of role
My wife
models
has a
that you
quote
should
for
look
that.
for.
My wife,
You know?
she says comparison is a thief of joy, and you should never fall victim to that or try
Absolutely. I think it's interesting being a counselor to many people. I remember I had a client one time who really liked to like give me it straight and forward, like tell me how can I fix myself kind of thing.
Okay.
And this was a man, he was in his late 40s and kind of just really very successful in the job and the money that he was making, but still having challenges with the relational dynamic and then also identity. And that was something that I was like, wow, okay, identity development is a really important concept that we don't learn within our school system. And then depending on how much our parents really know themselves in a true way, it can, it can vary in how we turn out. But with this client, he was like, tell me, what do I need to work on, focus on? I told him, you have to stop comparing yourself to other people out there. It's definitely something that has almost been conditioned for us at this point. Is kind of like we can't help it when we see so many things on our feed, and whether it's social media or just regular media, it's a constant consumption.
Right.
Yeah. A constant influence and consumption of what is the mainstream, what the standard is that we need to adhere to and meet. And that's BS.
Yeah, it is.
That is honestly said so beautifully, because I definitely look up to people that are older than me, because you could see the confidence that they have compared to the people in my generation now. Because we do see all these people, when you go on your Instagram, you see people partying, you see people drinking, you see people having fun,
Fancy
going
cars,
travel,
yeah.
fancy cars. It's like you kind of mold your brain into thinking that's normal.
Yeah.
And
Or
then
that's success.
Right, or that's
Yeah.
success. So people end up becoming more reserved. I've been seeing more lately. It's just they don't want to express themselves because they want to fit in that conformity of
It's almost like, well, since I can't show that I'm going off to Bali and living a
Right.
fabulous life
Right.
and being a jet setter, because I haven't made this accolade, then I can't tell anybody really what's going on in my life. And it's kind of but why? It's also a platform for us to be able to connect, to find community, to be able to, joke around with at times, or share different kinds of information, yes. But bringing it back to the mental health piece and how we start to look at ourselves when we are consuming information and media that is projected for a certain kind of beauty and a certain kind of success story. It's one of these things where we can buy into it, or we can choose to say, that's not how I define success. That's
get
not
lost in the
how I
sauce.
define beauty. It's interesting. As a Zennial, there's a part of me that's transitioning into a different age. I'm so close to being 40. And it's interesting because my body doesn't do the same things that it does anymore. My hair has streaks of white whispers in it now, But there's also this part of it where it's kind of it is a little harder for me to rock a bathing suit or a bikini and go to a beach and see people that are ripped and defined. And I'm all right, I still got my little pudge over here. And in the past, I think that motivated me to be work harder, Franci. Work harder so that you can be the one out there that feels confident in yourself in this way and that way. And now I realize I don't necessarily have to work harder. I just got to be cool
Work
with
smarter.
myself
Right.
inside. Right. And so it's I'll look in the mirror and I'm you know what? Not too bad for a 40-year-old over
There you go.
here.
There you go.
And
yeah.
finding the love piece within myself. Now, that takes work. It takes the mental health aspect to it. I'm a therapist that has a therapist.
You're supposed to. Yeah, everybody should have
I
somebody.
got the counsel out
Yeah,
there
yeah.
because there's still work to be done, and that's something that influences everybody. But yeah, this part of who we are and how we see ourselves in comparison to the world. I think mental health practices are so valuable in that
I agree.
because we need almost our mind and how we reflect the image of ourselves. It's almost like going to the gym and getting the six pack.
Right.
The results. You wanna see the
Yeah,
results.
it's you got to practice that. And so it might be that one is meditating or, having a good balance of physical exercise with, healthy diet, good sleep, and just a healthy lifestyle. talking with a variety and a range of people on different subjects and topics, you know?
I'm glad you said that, because that leads me to my next question. I was thinking about how I could be the most bring the most value to the listeners and to this conversation. I think some of the times that the stigma of people not wanting to reach out for the support and help with mental health is because they don't see the relationship or the relatable counselors that are out there. How do we bridge that gap?
I love that question. Okay. So I have gotten often, well, why would I want to tell a stranger all of my secrets, right? The thing is that as a clinician or a therapist, it's important to find the right fit. I will say that. And sometimes it takes a couple of, fittings and tries. But
it's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
Right.
At the end of the day, a therapist, like I had said earlier, can be somebody who's a coach, can be somebody who is a captain, can be somebody who is a cheerleader, somebody who is a Hanai family that's saying like, hey, like, these are the things that I'm noticing in the patterns of your relationship. I tell people all of the time, if I say have a caseload of 40 clients, I need to know 41 languages because the one extra language is my own language, right? That's what I have to know. But I need to know their language. And when I am able to know their language, sometimes it might be that they are a radio host. Sometimes it might be that they're a father or a vet, or a veteran. Sometimes it's a business owner. Sometimes it is a son. Whatever their language is, it's about connecting to how they see and understand the world and then helping them work towards the goals that they have in that. People think that therapy is something's wrong with me. No, that's not it at all. It's how do you want to connect to yourself and then expand the dopeness of who you are in such an expansive way that it becomes like a chain reaction for not just you, but then the surrounding communities around you and so on and so forth. And I think it's really about sitting in knowing who we are, learning about ourselves, and then also kind of sitting through some of the ugly stuff that all of us have, all of us got body odor. Right?
Hey, like, not me, I'll be stacking.
It's always crazy.
Right? Like we all got a funk to ourselves. We all have a certain natural scent that at times we're like, oh damn, I gotta take a shower here, right? And in this, it's kind of like that is just a natural part of who we are and how our body kind of like perfuses like, odors, scents, all of that. But the same thing with our personality.
100%.
Sometimes we got ugly personality that we're kind of like, ooh, how do I like, refine this to what I want it to be?
And that you're perfect because this. I was literally about to just say that therapy helps you to express the version of yourself that you want the world to see.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's not just something that's coming from a past pain that's just coming out like anger or hurt.
Given for experience, when I was going through college, I've always been an advocate for people to seek for more support more than they need to.
Right on.
And there's always people that always talk about these things because I tell them like, look, I would go to therapy myself. I would definitely do not mind doing that because it helps me unlock who I am as a person. Because someone who is looking at me, like, of course, I have friends, I have family that I can potentially rely on. But what about the people the person that doesn't know me? What do they think about me so that I can unlock something about myself so that when someone looks at me that I'd be able to, understand like maybe I'm giving off some sort of vibe for someone,
Absolutely. Especially because our loved ones, friends and family, they're going to have a bias, they also have a certain emotional connection to us.
And expectations too.
And expectation, right? And so because of this, at times, we're caught up in the pattern and the cycle with them and feeling some type of emotional or mental trigger from them. And so we can't even really notice the fact that we can't go to somebody who might be influencing us to repeat a pattern, or that we are impacted by in order to, to have a certain outcome. And I think that having a neutral, non-bipartisan, objective person that really in the end, they want the best for you, right? It's not like therapists get into this where they're like, I'm gonna make money. Though I will say this, when I first started to consider what am I gonna do, I remember thinking to myself, well, talking with a person for an hour, that doesn't seem so bad. I can make a buck doing that. I didn't realize how really the mental and emotional energy that gets put into it. But with that, there's a part of it where to have that third party that's able to kind of say, listen, I have no connection to the outcome of what you choose to do. I have no outcome to what I'm telling you and what you do with that information. I just care enough for you. If I'm seeing it, maybe you need to hear it from a different person in order to, like you said, unlock this piece of who you are. And I think that often happens with people in therapeutic settings, but we don't know that therapy can be so epically dope and amazing and insightful and enlightening in all of these juicy, gooey, yummy ways. And instead it's just I'm weak. It's no, homie, you're not weak. You actually
you're strong for being here.
Exactly. Exactly.
Are you familiar with the BetterHelp community? I see their ads like here and there because I follow some guy that
on
is
Insta?
part of it. Yeah, on Instagram.
Okay. Yep.
So I believe it connects like therapists for you for seeking help and whatnot. And honestly, that's such a cool thing.
It is.
I definitely like that because I think too is just like nowadays with today's world, I'm seeing it's a lot more acceptable to accept mental health. Like if you have some issue,
it's definitely a trending rhetoric. And it also is something, again, because Generation X, Millennials, Generation Z, it's like as we get older, we understand that that's so important that we're demanding that it be included in everything at this point. But the reality of people of Kauai, we have very minimal, scarce resources and services on island, unfortunately.
That's for everything across the board.
Absolutely, definitely. But when we think about mental health and how it's connected to healthcare, right? It's almost like being like, oh, we only have one cardiac specialist on island, and not having the critical people and professionals that really are here to help continue having a lively output to our community. So BetterHelp is an excellent resource for folks that are like, you know what, if I can't find it locally, if I can't find it statewide or regionally, let's try a different platform and connecting to a service and a resource in that kind of way. Now, KMHA does support and offer services to connect people to local therapists and counselors and or mental health professionals on island. It's one of our objectives or visions is so often as a clinician, I've learned that caseloads. So since there's a scarcity, all right, demand is high because everybody needs mental health services, but then the professionals are limited. And so all professionals are tapped out, are maxed in the caseloads that they have. So they're not taking new clients. So then often we go without. And this has allowed for us to be able for something like Better Health to be like, all right, let's continue to, navigate, navigate and find it. As a provider, my heart, when I'm like, yeah, I'm at full capacity, I'm not taking new clients, I couldn't just leave the conversation at that. And I think that that was almost like a step in advancing some of KMHA's resources and work is, but let me help you find somebody that does that is taking new clients and does take your insurance. And so bridging the gap in, you're no longer on your own, like, good luck out there,
Right.
but more of like, hey, you found the right person to come to. Let's do this together. And then have some hand holding in it, because navigating systems can be so difficult and challenging. We're not always taught how to do that. And so having a professional who knows how to navigate it and then support you with a hand holding process to it, I find that that's a valuable resource that we've been able to support the community with.
What are some ways that you could give advice for people that are seeking, mental health help, that they would love to figure out on their own first before they seek for a professional? Like, what are some home, like I wouldn't want to say
Remedies?
treatments, or remedies, but
Okay.
some things that they could keep an eye on for themselves to make sure that they're okay.
Okay. One of the things that I teach folks in working with them, and that I'm still learning for myself, is learning how to communicate with your body.
Honestly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like if you have like a stomach ache, is that it's your intestines?
We were just talking about that.
Right? Is it some type of indigestion,
Right.
or is it some type of anxiety? Is it something that is actually mental or like psychosomatic, what they call it, where it's kind of like something is like hindering you psychologically, and then your body tends to kind of say, I got this, I'm gonna take care of it, kind of thing. And
Autopilot kicks in.
right, and then your body starts to process it and sort of problem solve for it. So I'd say learning how to really communicate with our bodies, and when our body is saying, I'm in pain, I'm in discomfort,
I'm
I'm exhausted, whatever it's communicating, that we are able to say, all right, I hear you, and now I know how to take care of you, right? So that's one thing, learning how to
Getting to know oneself.
Yeah, hear the body piece of it. Also, another thing that I often will help and support folks on is in your brain, your thoughts can't always be trusted. All right?
That's what I said honestly about, right?
Exactly. Like, there's a part about being, whether we are feeling depressed, whether we are, comparing ourselves online to other people, like there's a lot of invasive thoughts that our mind will pop up and like have.
Definitely.
All right. I tell people not always to trust what they're thinking, and to have a part of them that's able to kind of like step out of their thought process and almost be an observer to their thoughts. Now,
become another person.
Yeah. No. So there was at one point, there was a term that I learned. Okay, hold on.
It'll come to you.
I need to find. Yeah,
That threw me off with the.
The master of disguise.
It's called equanimity.
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 Never heard that word.
So what equanimity is being self-reflective in an objective state of self without being incorporated within the foggy thoughts and feelings that one has.
Whoa.
It's interesting because
Rewind that and play that back, guys. For
yeah,
sure. That's a clip.
It's one of these things where it's kind of, there's multi-layers to how we're able to kind of tap into ourselves. And to be observant of ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings and how it impacts our behaviors. Okay, this is cognitive behavioral therapy. What you're thinking, what's in your head, what you are feeling, what's in your heart will come out in your hands in how you behave and how you act and do things, all right? There's a part of it where a lot of people will think, I can't control what I'm thinking. I can't control how I feel. And I like to challenge that with
Yeah.
people
Right.
and say, like, actually, I think that you can, but it's about learning.
It's a skill set.
Right. It's about learning how to be aware of these things. I would also say in anybody who isn't at the step just yet to seek out professional services, trying to make sure that you are like checking off certain fundamentals of lifestyle. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you like, do you have a healthy sleeping habit? Do you have healthy sleep hygiene? Is your diet healthy? You know, I like to have a little balance because every now and then it's summertime, and so I might like to, like do little chips on the beach with a bear, and like, stuff like that.
Just vibe out.
Exactly. Like, so having a balance, but do you have a good diet? Because what we are putting in our systems, it definitely can have an impact on how we think. How we feel. Are we sluggish? Are we,
I'm glad you said that because when I first got out the military, for those who are just tuning into the show and don't know nothing about me, I am a combat veteran. And when I first got out, I was dealing with a lot of like confusion of what to do next and where do I go, and
like an Olympian.
yeah, exactly.
After winning gold.
I was
What do I
tuned
do?
really tight, and then I just got into the world and just slowed down, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
what do I do today? Which way do I go? And I went to gambling and drinking and clubbing, and at that time of my life, I was really angry, and then I got really heavy. I gained a lot of weight, and I was in a really, really dark place, and I think back to that, and I was eating a lot all day, every day. I was snacking on something, and wake up, crack a beer, just go through that cycle. And at that moment, I was in the worst space in my life, and I was young. I was 22 years old, 23 years old.
Yeah.
And so what you put in is what you put out. I couldn't ride in cars very long. My knees would start hurting, and it was just bad. And now I'm working on that because a lot of that trauma and that depression and the PTSD, it's still there in me, but I don't allow it to affect my life to where it's in control.
Right on.
And that's the skill. We're talking over a decade of working on that.
Yeah.
And I'm still got to put in work. And
Yep.
so for those who are listening, who are dealing with, like she said, it is a skill to then step away from yourself, from oneself, and then realize, okay, this is why you're feeling that way, because you're doing this, and that.
Right. So we were talking about identity development earlier. This is emotional development, right? It's about being able to, one, recognize and identify what emotions exist and like what you might be feeling. But then two, be aware of it while you're feeling it. And then three, know how to healthily regulate. It's kind of like, I grew up where like anger was expressed with like throwing things across the room and like punching a wall and just like yelling and like,
Having
it's
two
like,
brothers, yeah.
right? Exactly. So it's like, but so that becomes a normal way for us to process the emotion of anger and frustration and discouragement or rejection or whatever, like some like deep wounded piece of it is. Is that the healthiest way? No, it's not. And so when we take a step back to really recognize like, all right, I'm angry in the moment, and all I want to do is
It's a zoom.
yeah,
No,
right, all right.
Sorry.
Fill in the blank, right? In that point, that's learning the skill set of knowing how to regulate oneself. What are the tools out there?
My wife is using our kids to do that right now, because she, when she wants to get mad at the kids for doing something, she thinks about it and she's like, okay, this is what my mom would have done. I want to be better than that. So let me process this for a little
Excellent.
deep breath.
Reparenting is a huge thing in mental health and wellness also, is learning how to reparent ourselves, because our parents, they did the best they could with what they had.
Facts.
Like there is a part of it where we can't, while they are connected to some of our deep wounds, like there's also a part of it where we got to give them love, credit, and gratification,
100%.
right? In that, it is still something where we learn how to reparent ourselves.
Right.
Sometimes it's by becoming a parent and recognizing like, damn, I want to give my kid what it is that I didn't get, but I know I needed, right? Things like that. But just to really wrap up for anybody who's listening and just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if going to a counselor or therapist is really the step that I'm at, how are you doing with your sleep? How are you doing with your diet? How are you doing with the relationships that you have? Are these things healthy? You know, and really taking a step back and looking at, am I good mentally? Am I good emotionally? Am I good physically? Am I good relationally? Am I good spiritually? I like to put it in a handful, 5 fingers in a handful right there. And if you can say yes to a majority of those, I'd say good for you.
Yeah.
Right on. Like, keep
Right.
rocking it out. But if there is like, no, like a majority of those I am not good in, can you trust that somebody out there is meant to help you get to a place where you can answer yes? And seeing if that's something that you can kind of get closer to.
Right.
Mhm.
That is beautiful. I have two things that I do want to talk about. One of them
Okay.
bounces off the idea of taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How can someone, we all try to help each other as much as we can,
Mm-hmm.
but there are friends that everyone has that may need it more than others,
Right.
but they're not going to be listening to this podcast. But they have these friends that they care about.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you become an advocate yourself to get someone to think, like, I care about my friend,
Mm-hmm.
or I care about this person, like, without forcing them to, make them think or regret that you're talking to them.
Right,
Right.
right. Yeah. I think that that's always kind of like trusting how you care about somebody and being tactful in how you talk about it, but
Tact.
like
Ooh,
yeah,
I got
tact,
some,
right?
I got a
Uh,
quote for that. Go ahead.
It's like there's a part of it where I help folks in kind of like, if they are concerned about others, learning how to acknowledge that concern in an honest way with the person, but then also not intensifying it so that it then becomes a larger burden for the person that they're concerned about.
Right.
And I think in that, it's really leading conversations with love. You know, I mean, it seems so simple and, kumbaya-ish, but at the same time, it's kind of like, if you can know that where you're coming from is a good place and out of love, and saying like, my man, I've noticed that, all right? And then observe, like giving them what you observe. I notice that you're a bit more withdrawn these days, like it's the summertime and it's a summertime on a Friday night and you're going home and, you seem like you're a bit withdrawn at times. And I'm just wondering if there's anything going on. And instead of making any assumptions, or what a lot of people do, avoiding the conversation, is actually addressing it like straight on, but doing it in a soft way where it comes off as like, I love you and I'm seeing that something's shifted or changed. What's going on? Anything? And I think that when other people hear like, oh damn, like they see it. They see how I'm feeling. I'm not masking good enough, right?
And they try to
Right.
go deeper.
They
Right.
might, definitely, or it might be the thank you for noticing.
Right.
I didn't think that anybody saw it inside of me, and it gives them the liberty and the relief to know that someone cares enough to talk about it with them.
Right. And I'll definitely say this, like, I'm just like everybody else. I have a couple of friends that are, experiencing new life changes, and, whether
Cool.
for the good or for the bad,
Okay.
that it definitely, you could see a shift in their mind of how they act towards like other people now because of it.
Right.
And it's my duty as the friend, if I am your friend, to tell you like, hey, I've been noticing that you've been acting this way. Or like, hey, like, are you sure you're doing that? You're falling into old patterns,
Yeah. I think the pattern piece, that's such a big one that a lot of people disregard. Like, it's one of the biggest things that I learned, especially first getting into this field and supporting others, but then like really kind of, Franci, look at yourself. Good-looking guy. Just being able to recognize, what are my patterns? And if you see a pattern within another person, that might be hindering them, hurting them, and or others, that's a huge key. Is like, this is the pattern, you know? It's almost like giving somebody the storyline and then being like, that crux right there, like there's a specific moment in that storyline where you could go left or you could go right. And usually you go right and then you just like keep on going in the same cycle. And at times it's in that moment, can you be aware enough, right? So it's identifying, awareness, regulating. Are you aware enough to recognize there's a fork in the road right now, and then regulate where, instead of going to default behaviors, that you're able to say, let me try something new and like move in a different direction.
I'm working on that as we speak, literally.
Right on, bro.
You're speaking to my soul
Yes,
because of the fact that, like you said before, you got to learn different languages when you're talking to different people. And if we're talking to our friends, right, we have a language that we're used to talking to and communicating with.
Exactly,
And if we come across mental health, sometimes you get on sketchy,
Yep.
you know, you don't want to cross any boundaries and make them mad at you. And so when you said tactfulness, it resonated with me heavily because there's a quote that says, truth without tact is cruelty. So you can be super honest with somebody and hurt their feelings completely because you're not tactful in it. And I was really bad at tact. I was I'm from Chicago. I'm from the south side of Chicago.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
like, I
Like,
tell you
I'm
how it
saying
is.
I'm just saying what it
truth,
is gonna
man.
be.
Like,
Yeah.
absolutely no tact with it. And sometimes maybe a little harsh joke about it.
Right,
Maybe I'm
right.
just saying it with a little smirk. And so I'm definitely working on that and approaching certain individuals with certain different ways and how they probably would better receive it.
Right.
I think too, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, guys, it's like there will be a point where like you're trying to help your friend, but they're not getting the point that you're trying to help them. You have to throw not aggression, but like a little more like demanding of in your voice to tell them like, hey, like what's going on? You know, it's
Yeah, definitely.
It's a big problem.
I think that there's different layers, and also it's kind of being close to my 40s now. There's a part of it where when I tell a friend like, hey, I'm noticing something here, I think they're much more receptive to it at certain times as to say if I were in my 20s and it's like, whatever, let's go and party. Like, you know, like, you know, like I said what I said, all right, now that I got that checked off with, moving on kind of thing. And I do think that it is at times persistence or consistency. It is in the intonation piece of it. So it's kind of like within the tact, putting a little bit more like, no, man, like, hey, I'm concerned, you know, and putting an anchor or some more weight to the emotional piece to see if that's how you can connect with that person.
The time and place too. So it's
Absolutely.
like you can't just be like, you know, you're out drinking with your friends. It's like, hey, I think I'm a little worried about you.
Oh my
While
God.
we're drunk.
But how many times have we where it's like at a bar and you're like, man, such a heart to heart. I love you. I love you too. You know,
up like, what happened?
yeah, exactly. And so I think that it is, you know, when we are in the right state of mind, maybe if there's a little, you know, the right environment. I do want to say that in these pieces, intimacy doesn't have to be just sexual, y'all.
Facts.
Like
Facts.
there's a part
We're intimate right now. I can touch each one of you.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a part of intimacy that if people can sit in intimacy and be safe to be vulnerable, and that's a hard thing.
Yeah, no, it
That's
is.
a hard thing for me at
everybody.
times. It's like I will rep vulnerability, intimacy, mental health and wellness all day long. But time and places where I'm like, I don't feel safe, right? And so I think that with loved ones, if we're ever seeing anything that is concerning, it's finding intimate moments where maybe you can show a little bit of your vulnerableness in order to almost be the model for them into kind of like, I see and I want to connect with you in this kind of way. And then also I want to say, leaving it up to them in the end. At the end of the day, it's really their journey in how they move forward. And we can lead a horse to water, but if they don't want to drink, they're not thirsty. You know, it's not for us to force them. And I do think that that is a huge part of mental health and wellness.
Yeah, so we touched on a lot of great key points with friends, family, how to work on thyself if you don't feel comfortable searching out for support with a third party or bipartisan party. How, seeing that we are 80s babies and we're transitioning into the role of leaders, right? And those who are out there who are also leaders, who want to help the community, and they're people that are their underlings. What do you call it? Somebody
Subordinate?
their team members, their subordinates.
Okay.
Yeah, team.
How do you suggest those leaders or those business owners help work on their mental health so that then they can pass that down to their team members to help with their mental health?
That's a good question. I think so. I feel like at that point, it really, the saying where in an airplane, put the mask on first, and then provide assistance to children. There's a part of it where, as leaders, we are going to be the ones that model it first for others, our team, to see, and then also kind of replicate at times. I'd say as a leader, as a business owner, a huge part of it is really being able to find a good balance in everything. I mean, I feel like we were really conditioned to believe that productivity,
Just go.
right? So the productivity defines value to ourselves. Success is the thing that represents how much who
you've
we
done,
are,
how much
right?
you've
Exactly,
accomplished,
right,
yeah.
exactly. In all of that, I think it's actually having a balance where you can feel good in the work that you do, showing up where you have a full capacity. Capacity is a big concept that I do teach a lot of people. Capacity, 3 things that entail capacity: energy, resources, and time. All right? If you don't have all 3 of those things, you don't have the capacity. So you can have time and resources, but if you don't have the energy, you don't have the capacity. If you have the time and the energy, but you don't have the resources, you don't have the capacity. And so I have taught a lot of people, and I think that this is really big for leaders to recognize and then model for people, is knowing when you have the capacity and when you don't have the capacity.
Wow.
I
And
love
then-
that because like it kind of stems into why people feel burnt out
Absolutely.
when they start doing more work than they can.
And there was an episode we were supposed to record here recently, a couple of weeks ago or something, where I had the time, I had the resources, but my energy was off. And I remember I called you and was like, yeah, today it's not going to be I'm just not feeling
Right,
it.
yeah.
So that is huge. I'm glad you
So the
touched on that.
capacity is a big one for, as a leader, as an owner to a business, understanding the capacity that we have within ourselves, okay? And then recognizing that the people that we are working with, the team members that we have, what capacity they have. Because at times, as leaders, we're going to be able to see it before they are able to.
Right.
It's kind of like there's times where it's like I can see where some of so I'm a supervisor to a couple of associates, and there's times where I can see that they're working on personal pieces and that they might not fit right with a certain kind of client because of what they are personally working on.
Right.
At times, I'm going to see that better than they're going to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's learning how to know capacity for self, capacity for others, and then again, that balance of, I might have the capacity to do this, but it's also a summer weekend and I want to live my life and have a good time and not feel so obligated to show up to work all of the time. And that means that that's what's going to get it done. That's what's going to prove and show success. Success, I think, shows like, are we happy with our personal relationships? Are we good in the, professional, occupational piece of our life? Is there part of our bodies that feel good and healthy? Our minds and our hearts that feel good and healthy? Are we grounded in how we're able to connect with ourselves and others? That's all a balance.
Yeah.
And I think that that's huge.
I want to redefine success out there, y'all. Y'all heard it first here on Talking Growth with
Let's hear
Ra. I feel like success should be just showing up as the greatest version of yourself. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with assets. Even though I like to teach about, assets over liability and, have generational wealth and all of that, you should still have that. But if you are striving for generational wealth and creating a business and trying to get assets and it's hindering you and you feel bad about it,
Mhm.
that's not success.
Mhm.
That's just that you're keeping up with the Joneses at that point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I truly love that because every interview that we've had so far, like
Mhm.
we've had them define their success,
Yeah.
and all of them have like had made me think personally like my definitions of success keeps on changing every time.
Right
we have
on.
new
That's
people.
an excellent
So it's
answer
like,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like helping each other out, really like just having these
Mhm.
conversations, like
That's what it's
you
for.
really see that the growth of
Yeah.
people.
Talk that
you
talk.
know,
Mhm.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So let's segment it to
Okay.
let's go back into your background.
Okay.
For the people that are listening,
Yep.
I'm sure that there are people that just tuned in.
Hey y'all.
You guys are listening to Talking Growth with Franci Davila, and
Yes.
we are talking about mental health. And she's the executive director and founder,
Co-founder.
co-founder
Mhm.
of the Kauai Mental Health Advocates.
You got it. Yeah, you.
So
Locked in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
how can they reach you?
Okay. So I have a website. It's called kawaimha.org. And then they can also email me at kawaimha@gmail.com. And then I also have a work cell that everything goes through. And that number is 808-631-1154. And if you need to pause it or play it back, do that. Yeah.
And of course, if you are just tuning in, we are going to be posting this on our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube,
Perfect.
as well as KKCR's first Friday of every month. KKCR will have one in their website too, kkcr.org, or you can go find ours at talkinggrowth.com.
Cool.
Thank you, Franci, for coming here today.
Thank you.
This has been dope.
This has been a
Neil,
great
Rob,
interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Of
No, I
course.
appreciate it. This is easy.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
guys. Aloha.
Take it easy.
Yee.